Let's now bring in one of the main players in the event that will be happening on Saturday, and that is the Siaya Senator, who is also the co-chairman of the Coalition for Reforms and Democracy Code Management Committee. That is Siaya Senator James Orengo. Thank you, Bwana Senator, for joining us tonight.
Thank you.
Right. So your coalition code is holding a rally here in Nairobi on Saturday, the same day that Jubilee's planned Afraha Stadium so-called Thanksgiving rally will be ongoing. Is it set to neutralize Jubilee's rally politically?
No, it's not set to neutralize. We just want to give another point of view in the aftermath of the decision of the International Criminal Court. And I think Kenyans are forgetting rather fast. The idea of having rallies simultaneously in order to tackle national issues is not a new idea. In the 90s, during the one-party era, we had a parallel rally on a Jamhuri Day,
right,
when Moi was having a rally at Nyayo Stadium, and we were at Kamkunji. It was a time when Kenya was going through a lot of debate about democratic change. And I think both rallies went on peacefully. So I think too much should not be read into it. They're dealing with the verdict in terms of the termination of the cases, not an acquittal, termination of the cases. In Kibera, we'll be dealing with the question of the victims.
But what will be the main message of Kibera's rally?
The main message is that in the aftermath of this decision at The Hague by the International Criminal Court, Kenyans should never cease to think about the victims who are there in their thousands. In the Hague trial, there are only 6 Kenyan individuals who went through trial at The Hague. Yet there are thousands of Kenyans, and I've just had the president talking about the integrated IDPs.
Right.
They're there in their thousands. Their case seems to be a lost one. Their lawyers were asking the question, what happens to the victims? And I think that is something that is important to highlight. And we don't think that in Nakuru that is going to be a major issue.
Right. Speaking of this, Mr. Senator, the court leader Raila Odinga did react to the ICC ruling last week, saying that the suspects had been vindicated. And now in France, he has stated that the ICC decision last week, dealt a major blow to efforts, to fight impunity. Isn't that doublespeak?
No. If you read that statement and if you listen to it properly, it was being made in the context of what has been happening at the African Union. Remember, and people actually forget, that the International Criminal Court, when the idea about the court was dying, it was the countries of the South that really pushed the idea about the creation of the International Criminal Court. Countries like Senegal, countries like South Africa later, Trinidad and Tobago, when America and France and UK were not interested in the idea of the creation of the International Criminal Court. It was these 3 countries from the South, after the discussions that started as early as 1948 by the International Law Commission about the creation of the International Criminal Court. So that court is very much an idea of the South. And he was saying, at the African Union, the idea is not about whether we need the court or not. The idea is about the immunity, right, of African heads of state. And he was saying, if you end immunity to heads of state, then the idea about the International Criminal Court.
Before we move on to something else, that has elicited some political reactions back home, and Jubilee are now trying to imply that the court leader asking, did he play a part in fixing the president?
I think there are some positive ideas which Jubilee can do as a government, and I think they can take my suggestion. There were the Ocampo envelope, the Waki envelope. They're in government. There are mechanisms. If you want the truth to come out, they can pursue through the appropriate mechanisms of the International Criminal Court to get that Waki envelope opened and made public. And I think that will go a long way in determining the truth around what happened in the year 2007 and the year 2008. They talk about that envelope, but they talk about it guardedly. But I think this is a time now that we must, challenge them that why don't they use the government machinery to use the ICC mechanism and even our constitution about the freedom of information, right, to get that envelope made public. The names that are there.
Right.
Secondly, if you look at the intelligence reports during that period, they speak loudly. And in fact, one of the part of the evidence that went to the ICC were from reports from our own National Intelligence Service. They should go into those reports and really establish who really took the six to the Hague.
Fair enough. Let's talk about something else that is making headlines. And what is your status as CORD of choosing the process of choosing the presidential flag bearer for the 2017 race?
Well, there's been some debate about that, but we're saying that is not a major issue. Who is going to be president? He'll be a Kenyan. But we're saying there are fundamental ideas that must be a matter of debate under electoral reform. And this is contained in the Okoa Kenya draft bill. And they range from the electoral infrastructure, the IBC, the role of the security forces in the election process, ideas about inclusivity, because if you go even beyond 1963, violence was always a component of our elections. And it has to do with exclusion. If we don't address that, then we can have elections and elections, but every election is not going to leave Kenyans satisfied. So we need to do with the electoral process and the inclusivity. We have been talking about devolution, which is an idea that its time has come, but its implementation is not being done in the right way.
Right, but Mr. Senator, we can't fail we can't fail to talk about the reported memorandum of understanding in CORD. You and the co-chair of Wiper, Machako Senator Johnson Mudama, did announce the other day that that particular MOU was between Raila Odinga and Kalonzo Musyoka, and Eseli Simiyu, the co-convener from Ford Kenya, was conspicuously missing. Ford Kenya people are feeling fixed or left out. What is your take?
No, there's a narrative in the media. The media, whatever we say, they will put, some kind of nuance onto it. The truth of the matter, even at that press conference, Eseli's apologies was given. But to come to the memorandum of understanding, that memorandum of understanding was there. Right. But it is not dealing with who is going to be the president on the year 2017. It is dealing with the coalition, the management of the coalition, and is also dealing with, the arrangement of political power and political structures if one of us was elected as president in the year 2013. As to the future, that document also gives us a pathway towards, nominating our presidential candidate. And if you follow it, we're not going to have any problems. And that's why in ODM and Ford Kenya and in Wiper and in CORD, we have 3 people actively seeking the office of the presidency without any problems. I mean, if you look at Jubilee, I mean, it is no contest. In Amani, ANC and the other parties, it is a no contest. The only party and coalition where you have 3 strong individuals who are seeking the presidency, and it looks like a normal thing, is within the CORD coalition.
So as a coalition, what is taking you so long in deciding that? Isn't that a disadvantage since the other camps already have their ticket already spelled out? Is this meant to give room for possible realignments in the future?
No, what we're saying, elections are not a beginning and an end. The elections is about running the affairs of society. Before we address those problems that are confronting us, and we have talked about them many times, beyond the need for repetition, even the elections themselves, we still believe, until we have a fair playing field in which we can have free and fair elections. Whether the Pope was going to be a candidate in Kenya you know, he would not win with the with the kind of electoral infrastructure that we have in Kenya.
So how are you
so we need to deal with the electoral law and the election infrastructure, including the Supreme Court. Unless we deal with those things in advance, then it is going to be impossible to have a free and fair elections. And I had President Uhuru talking about admitting losing the election in 2002. The country was in a different mood. It was almost a no contest at that time because the entire country united against KANU. But, you know, we are not going to have Kenya mobilize, you know, one community or a set of communities against each other. We need a fair process where a Turkana, a Samburu, a Giriama can become a president on an election which is based on ideas.
So final question, Mr. Senator, how are you going to achieve this? Because the Okoa Kenya bid, which in part sought to address that, looks dead in the water.
Well, if you go back to 1997 and 1992, you know, people said you cannot have a multi-party system. In 1997, Moi said you cannot have any other electoral commission other than the one that was in place under Judge Chisoni. But the people of Kenya, speaking together in one language, was able to transform this country from a one-party state to a multi-party state. In 1997, we were able to have reforms which led to Kibaki's victory in the year 2002. So whether or not, you know, the games IBC is playing is going to help Jubilee or not, that is not the question. The question is, are the people ready to fight for these changes? And we believe through the people of Kenya, and the Constitution says the people of Kenya are sovereign, we are going to be able to achieve those changes.
Right.
And it need not go through Parliament, by the way.
Thank you, Mr. Senator.
Thank you so much.
James Orengo, Senator, Siaya County, also co-chairman of the Coalition for Reforms and Democracy Management Committee.